I mean, this was a huge moment in the trial because he's one of the biggest celebrities to take the stand. And when Kid Cudi entered the courtroom, I mean, it was silent. All eyes were on him, and Combs was looking directly at him as he entered the courtroom. I mean, I think that all of these people that have testified so far, it's probably their first time testifying in a federal trial. So Kid Cudi seemed at ease, but also, I think, stressed to be there.
When Kid Cudi got up to the stand, he talked a little bit about the history between him and Cassie's relationship. Kind of break down what he said about that.
Kid Cudi said that he met Cassie in 2008, and then they eventually made some music together, that it was actually Combs who asked him to collaborate with Cassie, and that at first they were friends, but then their relationship turned romantic. But during this time, he had no idea during the year that he was dating Cassie in 2011 that she was also dating Diddy. At one point, Brian Steele, who cross-examined Kid Cudi, said, "So she was playing both you and Diddy?" And he said yes. He also said that at one point when he got to know Cassie that she did say that she had been in a romantic relationship with Sean Combs and that he had been physically violent, but he also testified that he was not aware of any sexual violence.
Now, he also talked about an incident from December 2011, which had to do with a break-in into his house. Can you tell me a little bit about what he said about that incident?
So Kid Cudi talked about an incident from December 2011 when Cassie called him one morning around 5:36 a.m. and that she was very stressed out. She said Diddy had just found out that they were dating and that he had asked for his address and that Cassie gave him Kid Cudi's address, and that she was very, very worried about what he was going to do next. So he said that when he got that phone call from Cassie that he sprung into action, although he was confused about why it would matter if Sean Combs knew that he was dating Cassie, because he had no reason to believe that they were still romantically involved. Remember, Kid Cudi had been dating Cassie, he says, for about a year at this point. He went and he got her from her apartment and he took her to the only place he thought would keep her safe, which is the Sunset Marquis. It's a hotel in LA. So in this phone call with Cassie, she says, look, Diddy knows we're dating. He asked for your address. I gave him your address, and I'm so scared right now. So he goes and he picks her up at her place and takes her to the Sunset Marquis Hotel. While they're there, they got a phone call from a friend of Cassie's who said, I'm sitting in front of your house right now, Kid Cudi. Sean Combs and an associate of his are inside your house. And that's when he was like, what is going on? He said he was angry. So he gets in his car. He said it was a Porsche 911 convertible. And on his way to the house, that's when he's starting to get worried about, what am I walking into? Could Combs have weapons? Who else could be there at the house? Could this turn violent? Although he said he did want to fight Combs for breaking into his house. And so he called 911, but he also called Combs and he said, why are you in my house? And he said, I'm on my way. So when he got to his house, Diddy wasn't there. What he did notice was that his surveillance cameras were turned the other way. Some Christmas presents were unwrapped from Chanel for his family. And that also his dog was in a bathroom with the door closed. And he said, he was looking around. He didn't see Diddy. He calls Diddy and he's like, where are you? And Combs is like, I'm on my way to your house. But Combs never shows up. The police show up and Kid Cudi files a police report. So after all of this, he ends up having some text exchanges with Combs. Combs says, I want to talk to you. And Kid Cudi actually went to Cassie's home for the holidays in Connecticut for Christmas, and he said he didn't want to talk to Diddy. He was really upset that he had gone into his house, that his dog was all shook up by the incident and acting jittery, and that he just really had a bad taste in his mouth about everything.
Last week, we heard Cassie testify about Combs threatening to set fire to his Porsche. Talk to me about what he said inside today about that incident.
Kid Cudi and Cassie stopped dating after this whole incident in which Combs allegedly broke into his house. So on this particular night, he's staying at an ex-girlfriend's house, and while he's there, early in the morning, he gets a call from his dog's babysitter who's house sitting for him and says, your car's on fire in the driveway. So he instructs her to call 911. The authorities and the fire department show up at his house, and then he calls a friend to go there and start taking pictures of his car. When he gets there, authorities are already at the scene, and what they find is something called a Molotov cocktail. That was a bottle with liquid in it and a rag that had been set on fire, and somebody had cut the roof of his convertible and dropped it inside. And then we saw pictures of all this damage today, and he said that unfortunately his car could not be repaired. So police collected all of this evidence, and there was some sort of an investigation. But today we heard on cross-examination Brian Steele, who's a very famous attorney out of Atlanta who represented Young Thug in his state RICO case. And he got up there and really tried to poke holes in this idea that Combs was the one who destroyed his Porsche. And he said, look, there was an investigation, nobody was charged, and they even took DNA evidence and fingerprints at the scene. And what connects Combs to this incident, right? Because all we really know is that Cassie said that Combs threatened to do this, but there isn't any security footage. There isn't any proof that Combs either told somebody to do it or actually did it himself. So Kid Cudi says that the very next day after this car incident, he actually meets Diddy at Soho House. So he's like, enough is enough. I'm going to call Combs. So he calls Combs. He's like, we need to meet up. So they decide to meet at Soho House, which is this very famous private members-only club that has locations all around the world. Kid Cudi arrives to Soho House, and Diddy's head of security, D-Rock, takes him to this conference room. And he actually described to the jury that when he walked in, Combs was looking out the window with his arms behind his back, and he said he looked like a Marvel supervillain. And at that point, the entire courtroom started to laugh. And so he's describing how they're both talking about how Diddy didn't know that Kid Cudi was dating Cassie, and Kid Cudi didn't know that Cassie was also dating Diddy. He said after this meeting was over, he stood up and he shook Diddy's hand, and that everything was calm. There was no screaming, there were no threats, but he said to Diddy, so what are we going to do about my car? And that's when Diddy said, what are you talking about? So again, that's something that Diddy's attorney, Brian Steele, really tried to poke holes in. Like, Combs never said that he did this to your car. What proof do you have that he is the one behind this? So again, this at times was a very heated testimony, right? With Kid Cudi recounting these really tough times that happened to him, but then also Diddy's attorney, Brian Steele, really trying to poke holes in what his version of the truth was. And there were these moments of laughter too, because, Kid Cudi's very charming and he's up there and he didn't know when to talk and what, maybe objections meant and sustained and all of this, because again, this is really foreign for everybody that's in there. So Kid Cudi was asked, did you ever see Diddy again after this incident? He said, yes. A few years later, I actually ran into him at Soho House. He was with one of his daughters, and he actually approached me, shook my hand, and said, listen, I'm really sorry about all the BS that happened before. But again, wasn't specific about what he was referring to, but did say that that brought him peace, that he wasn't expecting Diddy to apologize, and he really moved on with his life, obviously, until this federal trial came to be. Something else that stood out to me today is this morning, a former executive assistant of Combs's named George Kaplan, he testified, and he said that he quit his job because he didn't like how Combs was treating Cassie Ventura. He didn't like how he was treating another woman that he was dating named Gina, and that he really had strong moral principles. But he also said that he didn't want to testify, that he was forced to be here because the government subpoenaed him, that he still has some love and respect for Combs, that Combs made him a man and that really taught him what hard work was. And he said that, it was his Harvard, right, working for Combs, that it was difficult for him to be there and in the same room as Combs because he really didn't want to testify. So will this really matter to the jury, right? That some witnesses, they didn't call up prosecutors and say, listen, I have information, I want to testify. They were forced to be here and recount these memories. But again, he's speaking his truth, and they are talking about these incidents of violence against Cassie Ventura, which goes to the sex trafficking charge against him. And when you're hearing Kid Cudi up there, right, saying that perhaps Combs was the one who orchestrated his car to have this Molotov cocktail be thrown into it, that goes to the racketeering charge, right? So again, is a jury really going to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Combs sex trafficked Cassie and other women and that he was running a racketeering conspiracy with his businesses? Again, Combs' legal team is putting on a really strong fight trying to poke holes in everything these witnesses are saying. But the prosecutors also are bringing their own receipts as well.